Geography and You presents.
Hello and welcome back to the GNY live podcast series on the air we fear. I am your host Hiteshika and you are tuning in to the finale episode of our riveting podcast series The Air We Fear. Over the past episodes, we have examined the pressing issue of air pollution, unraveling its causes, consequences, and potential solutions. And today, we are bringing you a discussion that ties it all together: land use, afforestation, and governance, critical levers in the fight for cleaner air and a healthier planet. Joining us for this thought provoking conversation are two distinguished voices in the field. We have Dr. Sulagna Chattopadhyay, Editor in Chief of Geography and You, and a special guest, Mr. Chetan Agarwal. He's the Senior Fellow at CEDAR and an independent forest analyst. His work promoting ecosystem management from forest watershed services to biodiversity conservation has influenced policies at multiple levels using innovative approaches such as tenure systems, zoning regulations, and incentive based frameworks. Today, we will explore the powerful intersection of land use policies and air quality, examining how sustainable forestry and effective governance can mitigate pollution, restore ecological balance, and shape a more breathable future. With that, I now invite Dr. Chattopadhyay to lead us into this insightful discussion. Over to you, Dr. Chattopadhyay.
Thank you, Hiteshika. Although you mentioned that this was the last episode of the Air We Fear series, I'd like to let our listeners know that this is just the beginning. It's a bugle. It's a bugle call for a battle, actually. The battle that we need to awaken everybody about how we must fight for clean air. We are very delighted to have you, Mr. Agarwal. A very warm welcome to GNY Live. Now, let us begin a discussion on the ridge, really. We would start with the Delhi Ridge and then take this discussion a little forward into the other areas, other Ara valleys that are in other states as well.
Right.
So, Delhi has these rocky hillocks and wild jungles. Why is it so important to have them? Because there are snakes and stuffs, and we should remove all these dangerous things and build homes for people, keeping all these critters out. So why is it that such a tiny, kind of now really tiny patch of land should be saved?
Well, Delhi is one of the greenest capitals in the world, and that's because of a accident of geography that the Delhi has element of the Aravallis running through it, so which is uncultivable. So historically, these were village common lands which were not put under private agricultural use, and they remained as common lands which were owned as Shamlat common lands. And then after independence, all these common lands through an act were vested with the Delhi government. So we have been very lucky that there were these precursor common lands in the area where Delhi was formed. And they have become now the Asola Bhatti Wildlife Sanctuary and the Southern Ridge and the Central Ridge and so on. And as far as the question as why do we need this, if you try to imagine a city in the Gangetic Plain which has wiped out all its vegetation, and it has basically, even from a very selfish perspective of recreation, you have no large green spaces. So I think it's a real privilege that we have these relatively large patches beyond our small parks in our urban areas that we can access and commune with nature. And they also give other species a habitat and a right to live, if I may say that. So I think those are the two main reasons I would forward.
Okay.
Of the benefit of having the Aravallis and the ridge.
So the beauty of
next
it.
to us.
Yeah, the beauty of it and the present. But
Yeah.
you said Delhi was green already. So, it's green. So you said one of the greenest cities in the entire world. You said so that is not because of
One
the rich forest. It's generally because of the urban forest as well.
Well, the ridge is the primary urban forest. All the parks that we have, I mean, the biggest park we have a Nehru Park and Buddha Jayanti Garden and Lodi Garden, which are a few hundred acres, really, right? But the Delhi Ridge runs into thousands of acres, and those are the urban forests which have been kind of afforested over time, over a century,
Hmm.
with the effort starting in the British times.
Yeah.
Uh, So the Delhi Ridge also gives us numerous ecosystem service benefits. It's a groundwater recharge zone. So all the little rain that Delhi gets, it's a semi-arid zone.
Hmm.
So it recharges the groundwater. It's also a large green lung for Delhi. So we are the choking capital of the world,
Yeah.
as you've been covering in your last 8 episodes. So the ridge plays its own small role in acting as a green lung and mitigating the air pollution to a little bit, to a small extent, not a major extent, because the green areas also get overwhelmed beyond a point. But they do play a role in deposition of particulate matter specifically. Uh, so
Right. Right.
So
So
for I think these reasons, it's a critical ecosystem service area for the city.
persons like you, like Mr. Agarwal, you've been fighting to save the ridge and its forests, and you have a lot of things that you have brought about. But and there are PILs, and But my question is that we already have acts and laws made by the government. Why is it not enough to have a Forest Conservation Act of 1980? Why is it not enough to have a Delhi Preservation of Trees Act of 1994? And then there's this Godavarman judgment of 1996. Why do we need
Right.
a ridge management board? Why do we need a central empowered committee appointed by the Supreme Court? Why do we need all of this when we already have mechanisms out there saying what we are to do? I mean, there is a direction, there is an act.
So that's a very good question, and I also think about that. Why does all this effort has to be made both outside the government and within the government? And I guess the simple answer is there are multiple stakeholders and multiple interests at play, right? So someone wants to build a temple and they say, okay, where can I get free land? Let me go and sit in the ridge. Or there's a institution which is outside, within the government system. So there's the army, the army is there, the educational institutions. So everyone land is scarce in Delhi, uh, relatively. So if you can get easy access into the forest, then people say, let me build a house. Let's build a few more houses beyond the colony that we are living in. So basically, for housing, for institutional buildings, for temples, for polo ground, even all of these things have come up in the Delhi Ridge in the past, and have been kind of pushed back, and some of them are still there. So what happens is that you can have an act, but like we have been told that having the fundamental rights in our constitution is, it's just one step, but they have to be enforced and people have to fight for their rights and demand them. And these are living documents. So if so, similarly, the Godavarman judgment says that if an area looks like a forest and
Mhm.
meets the dictionary meaning of a forest, then it should be treated as a forest and protected under the Forest Conservation Act. And this was said in 1996, like you said, and that's almost 30 years, ago. But Haryana has still not identified its forest as per dictionary meaning, which is right next to Delhi. Delhi has come up with its own guidelines, but they've not been fully implemented. So the Act may say that protect forests, or their judgments which say protect the Delhi Ridge. But the question then becomes, we get into these practical questions of what is a forest, what is a ridge area. And so these things have to be adjudicated. So either the government has to be motivated enough or the courts have to motivate the whole process. Which is why, because there's so many stakeholders in play, uh, and governments have lots of things to do. So these things kind of get dragged on for a long time. So example would be the demarcation of the Delhi Ridge.
Hmm.
So the Delhi Ridge has been notified, but it's a preliminary notification, and then it needs to be demarcated, and then the final notification needs to happen. That's been pending for about 25 years now.
Oh God.
Uh, and One of your previous speakers was the amicus curiae in that matter in the NGT, uh, Mr. Raj Panjwani.
Yes,
So,
Raj
so
Panjwani ji.
he's been amicus in that matter since I think 2014 or 15, and the matter is ongoing. And they're saying that do it, and they're saying yes, we are doing it. So there's slow progress which is happening.
So if one does demarcate the Delhi Ridge, what happens?
The question, okay, let's turn the question around. If it's not demarcated, then what happens?
Encroachment.
So that someone can build a house on the edge of the ridge area, and he say, okay, I'm not in the ridge. It's not demarcated. So I'm in my village private land. As per my records, which my Patwari has given, this is my land. So then there's a conflict and people keep building and they keep pushing the edge of urbanization into the forest. Because it's not demarcated, the forest department can't conclusively say that you are encroaching. It's an open question. Who's encroaching? So which is why the demarcation needs to be finalized urgently.
My question is that, where the demarcation is there, say, is there a stop to encroachment? Is there no way that you could still do?
It's much less. It's much less because you don't have the benefit of the fuzziness. Because if you encroach in a demarcated and notified forest, which is notified as reserve forest, as most of Delhi Ridge is, then most of the encroachments have really stopped. In the sense, it's only whether it's not demarcated where the people have been pushing the envelope and the boundary. But where it's demarcated, then the government can put a fence. If it's not demarcated, where will they put a fence? They don't know where the boundary is. So that fuzziness is exploited by the illegal kind of actors, the illegal encroachments. And then, of course, there's the legal encroachment, which can happen, which is a different issue. But the illegal ones benefit from the fuzziness of non-demarcation.
But we do have some mapping. MCD has done some mapping with morphological, the GSDL mapping. So if some mapping is available and it has been, so there are these agencies. So why isn't linked, suppose DJP, Delhi Jal Board, or the BSCS, or, things are linked together and you don't give people water, electricity, etc., etc., and it's a cohesive. Why is this multiplicity of so many organizations overlapping claims and things on each other? Like DDA does its own thing, MCD does its own thing. So what is happening here? I mean, what is really happening?
So there needs to be one agency which kind of says, okay, we are speaking for the ridge and we will coordinate with everyone and make sure that, okay, DDA, you don't give this permission, and the Delhi Rail Board, you don't give water. But if the demarcation is not done, then the agency which is supposed to protect cannot enforce the law, because first they have to adjudicate the issue of whether that person is encroaching or not. And without demarcation, it puts everyone in this kind of amorphous zone, which is why the demarcation is really important. And the process is ongoing. The mapping has happened, I think, and now they are in the process of removing the encroachments. But you need police.
Yeah. So I just want to get there. What kind of encroachment? I mean, can you give us some sense of what kind of encroachment do you see on the ridge, really? So if you could just expand a little bit on that.
So there are legal and illegal ones. So illegal ones are typically, there might be a basti at the lower end, some poor people living in a slum, or there would be builders, unscrupulous kind who have expanded into the ridge. So beyond the abadi of the village, and then they make flats and sell them off. So they've got free land. So they just have the cost of construction, and then they sell the flats to unsuspecting people. A classic example is on the edge of Delhi, near Surajkund, in South Delhi. Uh, a whole colony was established in about several hundred acres. Maybe 10,000 people were living. There were 10,000 houses there, and people were sold that land, saying on this is village common land, and they were sold on power of attorney, saying this is in Delhi, and it was actually that crossed the border into Haryana,
Okay.
and that was a notified it was notified as a forest, and so not only you don't know whether it's a forest or not, but you think you're in Delhi, but you're actually gone into Haryana. And then the matter reached the Supreme Court, and the court finally just said, it was quite brutal actually. 10,000 houses is not a small amount of, you know,
Hmm.
imagine the number of people living there.
They were already
So
living there.
it's a
They were
who
already
were
sold.
living there, and
Okay.
who thought they were in Delhi. They had power of attorney saying ki you are in in a village in Delhi. So it
Amazing.
was a human
Amazing.
it was a human rights disaster.
Yeah.
It was a catastrophe for them. So that's on one end, and then you had ashrams in the Delhi Ridge. You had the polo ground. The army was there. DDA owns a part of the Delhi Ridge, which is not notified as a forest. So where the where the forest department hadn't been given charge. So this kind of battles have happened since the 80s and 90s, and they started with the MC Mehta case.
Hmm.
So, but the biggest are builders building flats and saying that you are on village land, common land, but you're actually in forest land. And because it's not demarcated, there's that fuzziness.
Hmm.
So people are left, they buy those areas, and then the legal encroachments are where they get through some hanky panky, they get a license from the government to construct,
Hmm.
or the matter goes to court, and the court kind of says, okay, you can construct in some of the area, which is what happened in the Vasant Kunj Ridge.
Yeah.
Because it was not with the forest department, it was with DDA. Finally, the court said, okay, you can construct in half or one third. Army gets one third, and one third will become a biodiversity park. So the Vasant Kunj Aravali Biodiversity Park was the result of that adjudication, as was the DLF Vasant Kunj Mall. So that is also in the ridge.
Yes, that's also on the
Uh,
ridge. Yeah.
yes, so that is a legal encroachment into the ridge
Yeah.
in my books.
Right. Is there any way to, like, these encroachments which you are saying, quote unquote legal, um, what is the outcome? I mean, they stay there, they're demolished. What happens? I mean, if
So
you do
so
have a
so
demarcation.
there's a saying in conservation, which someone told me a few years ago, that all wins are temporary and all losses are permanent. So
Okay.
you can keep winning and and saving an area, but one fine day, someone comes with a license, and then the land use changes.
Um,
So if you've already lost somewhere, I think uh, if there's a legal encroachment, then there's not much you can do because that's been kind of settled. But the real challenge is where you still have large patches of ridge, we should at least protect those and not divert them legally or let people encroach them illegally.
okay.
And if I can add over here,
Yes.
another, Delhi is fortunate that it has this NCR regional plan.
Hmm.
So Delhi and its surrounding districts of Haryana, Gurgaon, Faridabad,
Hmm.
Ghaziabad, and another ring of districts, they're part of the National Capital Region.
Hmm.
And the regional plan is prepared by the NCR Planning Board. And that regional plan currently has very strong protection for forests, water bodies, riverbeds, floodplains, as well as the Delhi Ridge and the Aravallis.
Hmm.
And it says very clearly that construction is severely restricted to less than 0.5% of a plot, and that too only for a recreational activity, a regional recreational activity. So we have a very strong protection for Delhi Ridge from licenses being given, uh, through the development uh, planning process. So as per the regional plan, which is the super master plan for the NCR, you're not supposed to give any construction licenses in the ridge.
Okay.
So the Gurgaon and Faridabad master plans don't allow construction as of now,
Okay.
and
That's
neither does the
great.
Delhi master plan. Yes, but there's a very strong move to delete that protection from the region plan.
Okay. And that's also up in the courts.
Not in the courts. It's basically the PMO, I think, has stepped in.
Okay.
And so this a similar attempt was made in 2014, and the PMO stopped the NCR Planning Board and Haryana from getting rid of the limit on construction. And now then there was a renewed attempt a few years ago because a new regional plan has been made.
Hmm.
It's in a draft stage, but it's kind of not been finalized for the last 2 years, primarily because of I think intervention at a very senior level, that this should not happen. We should not allow construction in the Aravallis.
Okay, now since you did mention the NCR, and I'd like to take this a little beyond Delhi Ridge only and just talk about Aravalli, which extends into Haryana, into Punjab, Himachal in the north, and Rajasthan and Gujarat. Where, recently there was this report about 31 out of 128 hills in Rajasthan. They've been lopped
Right.
off and things like that. But,
Yes.
just to be a devil's advocate here, cutting down mountains is, it's nothing new really. I mean, we have so many lofty Himalayan mountains, they've been cut down for roads and habitations. I mean, we don't go around counting how many Himalayan mountain tops have been chopped off or something. Why do we make such a big deal out of, just 31 out of, so many hills being destroyed or
Right.
whatever? I mean, what's the big deal?
Uh, so one, we have a lot more of the Himalayas, and we have been kind of we are destroying the Himalayas also primarily through infrastructure. We're not mining in the Himalayas so much, but the Aravallis are very rocky, so they give you this very nice quartzite and sandstone stone, which is good for gravel and for construction. And we are in the concrete age, right? So all our construction requires a lot of concrete.
Hmm.
All our flyovers, our roads, they require gravel, our high rises. So the demand has really increased. So what happens is that if you have unscientific, one is the scale of demand is so high that we are losing a lot of these hills, a large area. So we really need to find a way to build in a more efficient way, perhaps, or build less, build smaller. The second is that the mining is quite unscientific. So you are the biodiversity impact of this mining, the groundwater recharge impact, your air quality impact is fairly significant.
Okay.
And
What
so
about the winds? Does it impact any winds that come in from
yes, and
Rajasthan?
that also so that's the broader regional role which the Aravallis play. I mean, the what geographers say is that if you look at North India, a map of North India, the Aravallis, they span from Gujarat to Rajasthan to Haryana to Delhi,
Hmm.
and they are basically a bulwark against the hot, dry desert winds from the Thar, which come from the west, and then they hit the Aravallis, and then they drop their sand on the windward side, which is on the western side
Hmm.
of the Aravallis. Which, if you actually see on Google Earth, you can see these large areas of sand on the west side of the Aravallis. So they are actually protecting the Indo-Gangetic plain from desertification, in a sense.
Hmm.
Uh, so that is a very critical role, and that they've been playing that role for millions, if not billions, of years. Uh,
So, if you can just tell us a
so
little about this Punjab Land Preservation Act of the 1990, which actually applies to Haryana and Himachal as well. So, if you can just tell us a
right.
little bit, how does it protect the Aravalli really?
So the difference between, say, if you take a step out of Delhi into Gurgaon or Faridabad, which are the districts of Haryana which are adjacent to Delhi, the south, is that Delhi in the 1950s, in this burst of nation building and capital building, they passed an act and they vested all the village common lands with the Delhi government.
Hmm.
Haryana did not do anything like that. So all the Aravlis, which were village common lands in Delhi, got vested with the government, and they had been notified as reserve forests. Some of them had been done in the pre-independence, and then with the MC Mehta sir's intervention in the Supreme Court, a lot happened in the 1990s. But in Haryana, there is virtually no reserve forest in the Aravlis. In South Haryana, there are hardly any reserve forest. So all the Aravlis were village common lands, and the only legal protection they had was under the Punjab Land Preservation Act.
Okay.
Many of the areas had been notified under that, and then the Supreme Court said a notification under the PLPA, under specific sections of the PLPA, is equivalent to declaring it a forest.
Hmm.
So the court clarified, because Haryana, when this mining boom happened in the 90s, the Haryana said ki, earlier Haryana had said that PLPA notified areas are forest to the Supreme Court. And then few years later, they said, sorry, we made a mistake. They're not actually forest.
Oh.
And then the court said, you can't do a somersault. Those are the words of the judgment. They say you cannot now do a somersault and say these areas are not forest. So the PLPA is very important for Haryana because the government has not notified large areas as reserved or protected forest. The large notifications have only happened in the last year of PLP areas because they need to offset the Andaman forest diversion. So that whole port which is being built in the Nicobar Island, so they need to offset about 65,000 acres of forest.
Okay.
So they've notified about 60,000 acres in the Aravlis in South Haryana. But this is like blood. It's a blood notification because it's to offset.
I know. Those are the ancient forests of Nicobar. I mean, those forests
Nicobar,
are
right.
all the wild, what we say, the genetic materials are there in these forests.
And the first Homo sapiens which came into South Asia about 60,000-70,000 years ago. So the people, the Shompen and all who are living in those islands, they're the first humans who came here out of Africa, perhaps. So it's also it's akin to a genocide.
Yeah, it's really, really sinks your heart, really.
Yeah, but so because of that offset, Haryana has benefited that some of the PLP areas have been notified as protected forest. But otherwise, PLP is the only forest protection, legal protection as forest because of the court interventions. And then this matter keeps coming up in the court every 4-5 years. Someone goes to court and says, I'm a builder, my land is under PLPA, why am I being constrained? Or the government goes, as they went in 21. And then in 22, there was a kind of comprehensive judgment saying PLP areas are forest. And then we have other areas which are not notified under PLP or any other notification as RF or protected forest. So those areas meet the dictionary meaning as forest. Like the Mangar Bunny is not notified under PLPA or as anything.
Okay.
So those areas would meet the dictionary meaning of forest, and therefore they would, as enunciated in the Godavarman judgment, they would be protected under the Forest Conservation Act. So Delhi has guidelines for identifying its deemed forest. Haryana doesn't. It's been, they're still thinking about it. They made draft guidelines several times in the last decade. They made one recently this year also, apparently, last year, this year. So we are all waiting with bated breath for the guidelines to be issued and then implemented.
Mr. Agarwal, after speaking with you, for this this half an hour discussion, and we're coming to an end of it, but I get a sense that without court, without the interventions of court, there is really nothing we can do about the ridge. That is what it seems like. That it seems like the court is standing there, and that's about. I mean, perhaps the Supreme Court is the kind of the final bastion to save the ridge. I mean, how correct is that assessment, and how dangerous is it to just depend on just one court at the end of the day to help you save the ridge?
So, beggars can't be choosers. So if in the government system you have very little support, there is some support, obviously. So we have to, strengthen the arms of the forest department and all. So I think, but you are largely correct, and it is a very critical issue. Right from the 1990s, the court has stepped up again and again and again. There are about 10 Aravali judgments related to Delhi
Hmm.
and Haryana
Hmm.
from the Supreme Court. The Delhi High Court is also very strong these days. The NGT has played a stellar role in many judgments. Uh, and many things are still up in the air. So you're absolutely right. Not only has this protection happened in the past, but there are currently several matters as to this dictionary meaning of forest is being it has been amended out of the Forest Conservation Act by the MOEF in 23, and that has been challenged in the Supreme Court. So that has to be decided what will happen to dictionary meaning of
Hmm.
forests
Hmm.
provision. Then the question of what is Aravali, and so that the Supreme Court has asked the government agencies to come up with a definition of Aravali so the protections can be applied to it. So this is still in the air. Uh, and then there's several small other cases going on. So you are absolutely right. The courts will have a very important role in the
Yeah.
future as they've played in the past.
I hope the court, is with the movement of saving the Aravali. I mean, I can only say that we need to perhaps step up our understanding of at least awareness about it, because most people are not aware of how important the ridge is and why we need to fight for it, and why Delhi's
Yes,
air, or for that matter the entire North India, how we depend on the Aravali for more reasons than one. And therein I feel some amount of grassroots mobilization would also perhaps help. What do you feel?
right. Absolutely. It would. Also, the press plays a very important role in educating and making people aware about what's happening and why it's important. And because we are the national capital, so I think we get a little bit more coverage. So that also helps the around.
Right. We had a great time, Mr. Agarwal. The discussion was, it really showed so many facets that we need to discuss, talk about, debate on, and bring to the front. Thank you once again. And I would request Hiteshika to kindly close this discussion for us for today.
Thank you, Dr. Chattopadhyay, for leading today's insightful conversation, and a heartfelt thanks to Mr. Chetan Agarwal for sharing his invaluable expertise on the conservation of the Delhi Ridge. Your perspectives have truly illuminated the ecological significance of this vital green lung and underscored the urgent need to protect it from urban encroachment and degradation. To our listeners, thank you for being part of this journey with GNY Live and tuning in to the Air We Fear series. Over the course of these episodes, we have explored air pollution from multiple perspectives: science, policy, law, governance, and citizen action, shedding light on its causes, consequences, and solutions. The fight for cleaner air doesn't end here, it continues with each one of us. If you have found these discussions valuable, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Spotify and Instagram so you never miss an episode. For a detailed blog covering today's episode, visit www.geographynu.com. This may be the final episode of The Air We Fear, but the conversation doesn't stop here. Stay engaged, stay informed, and stay committed to a healthier future. We will be back with another compelling series bringing you more in depth discussions. Until next time, this is your host Hiteshika signing off.